My name is Emily Carter, and if you had asked me when I was about 12 years old if I was happy, I would have answered yes without hesitation. I had a typical American family. My father was an engineer at a factory in the suburbs of Cleveland. My mother was an accountant at a small insurance company. We had a neat house with a white fence, a dog named Max, and Sunday breakfasts with pancakes. We weren't rich, but we always had enough for the essentials. At least, that's how it was until my sister came along. I was born first. My parents like to say that I was an easy child. I started reading early. I hardly ever cried. I was obedient, and I tried not to cause any trouble. I sensed the adults' moods like a barometer and instinctively adjusted to them. When I turned 7, Lauren, my younger sister, joined our family. She was the complete opposite of me from day one. Lauren cried loudly, demandingly, as if the world owed her something. If she wanted to eat, it had to be right now. If she didn't like something, everyone around knew about it. My parents joked that she had character, but over time it became clear that it wasn't just character. One of my earliest memories of her is still vivid in my mind. I was 9, Lauren was 4. We were standing in the supermarket. My mother was choosing groceries, and Lauren noticed a bright box of candies at the checkout counter. "I want that," she said, pointing her finger. "No, Lauren," my mother replied calmly. "We have sweets at home." The next few seconds changed everything. Lauren screamed as if she had been hit. She collapsed to the floor, started kicking her legs, shrieking, and throwing baskets around. People stopped. Some looked with disapproval, others with sympathy. My mother turned pale. I stood nearby, not knowing where to look. "Lauren, please," my mother pleaded. "I hate you," my sister screamed. In the end, the candy did end up in our shopping cart. That was the first time I understood. Screaming works. Over the years, such scenes became more frequent. Lauren could be laughing and hugging me one minute, and the next minute she'd throw a toy against the wall because I looked at her the wrong way. She tore up notebooks, slammed doors, and blamed everyone around her. When she was 8, our parents took her to a specialist. After several appointments, they gathered us all in the living room. "Lauren has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder," my father said cautiously, "and emotional instability." I didn't understand much then, but I clearly remembered my mother's words. "We'll have to be more patient with her. Emily, you're the older one. You have to help us." From that moment on, something in our family subtly but irreversibly broke. If Lauren didn't want to do her homework, I had to understand. If she had a meltdown, I had to not provoke her. If she took my things without asking, I had to be wiser. It was as if no one noticed my achievements. Good grades became the norm. My victories in school competitions were taken for granted. But every good week for Lauren was accompanied by exuberant joy, trips to cafes, gifts, and words like, "We're so proud of you." I didn't hate her, but I started to disappear. By the time I was 15, I knew clearly. My only way out was to leave. Studying became my quiet form of escape. I joined the library, worked part-time after school to avoid being home for too long. Lauren, meanwhile, grew up chaotically. She could be charming, funny, incredibly persuasive, especially with strangers. Teachers either complained about her or defended her. Some considered her troublesome, others spontaneous. At home, she was the queen. If she was in a bad mood, the atmosphere became suffocating. If I objected, my parents looked at me as if I were cruel. "You see, it's difficult for her," my mother would say. "You're strong, you'll manage," my father would add. At 16, I realized for the first time that I had nowhere to go back to. Home wasn't a place of safety, but a territory where I had to be accommodating all the time. And yet I hoped. I hoped that when we grew up, everything would change, that Lauren would mature, that our parents would learn to see both of us. I didn't know yet that this was only the beginning, and that the hardest trials were yet to come. By the age of 17, I had stopped considering our house my home. Formally, I lived there. I slept in my room, ate at the same table, and greeted my parents in the mornings. But in reality, I existed somewhere on the sidelines, like a piece of furniture that is only noticed when it gets in the way. Lauren, on the other hand, occupied all the space. Her adolescence began abruptly, as if someone had turned a switch to the maximum. Her moods changed without warning. In the morning, she could be sickeningly affectionate. In the evening, she would throw a plate against the wall because dinner wasn't right. Our parents tiptoed around the house. I saw how my mother, before saying anything to Lauren, would take a deep breath as if she were diving underwater. "Emily, don't start now," she would whisper to me. "She's had a hard day." Lauren always had a hard day. She stopped doing her homework. Teachers called home. Our parents apologized, promised to deal with it. Dealing with it meant buying her new clothes, allowing her to skip school, and letting her get away with not cleaning up after herself. I, on the other hand, was told that I should be an example. In my last year of high school, I was preparing to apply to the University of Washington. I needed a high score. A scholarship was my only chance to get out. Every evening I sat at the table in my room, surrounded by notes, when a cacophony would begin from the living room. Lauren's music, her loud laughter, the slamming of doors. One day I couldn't take it anymore. "Lauren," I said, entering her room, "could you turn the music down? I really need to concentrate." She didn't even turn around. "So what?" she snapped. "Is that my problem? This is our shared home." She laughed, loudly, contemptuously. "You're always so righteous," she said. "It's sickening. Do you think you're better than me?" I went out and went to my parents. It was stupid. I knew how it would end, but I still hoped. "Mom, Dad," I began. "I can't study. She's making noise on purpose." My father wearily rubbed his face. "Emily, you know Lauren can't control herself." "And me?" I asked. "Can I?" My mother came over and put her hand on my shoulder. "You're strong. You'll manage. Maybe it would be better for you to study at the library." That was the moment when something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just forever. A month later, Lauren announced that she wanted to move in with our aunt in Arizona. The reason was absurd. Nobody's suffocating me there. My parents discussed it for several evenings. I sat on the stairs and listened. "Maybe it will do her good," my father said. "At least Emily will be able to finish her studies in peace," my mother added quietly. For the first time in many years, I felt hope. Lauren left for 6 months. Those 6 months were the calmest of my life. I studied, slept without headphones, and came home without feeling tension in my chest. The house suddenly became quieter. My parents looked older, tired, but calmer. I got into university, received a partial scholarship. I was already packing my things when the phone rang. "Emily." My mother's voice trembled. "Lauren is coming back." It turned out that my aunt couldn't handle it anymore. Lauren skipped school, was rude, made scenes, and brought strangers home. My aunt said she didn't sign up for this. Lauren returned different, more defiant, more angry. A week after her return, my parents called me for a talk. "We need to talk about money," my father said. I understood immediately. "We can no longer help you with university," my mother continued. "Everything is going towards Lauren's treatment." I sat in silence. I wanted to scream, but I felt empty inside. I'll work, I finally said. And I worked in a cafe, at night, on weekends. I studied. I saved money. I didn't complain. Lauren, meanwhile, continued to live as if the world owed her something. When I left, I didn't look back. I didn't know yet that the break was only just beginning. Seattle greeted me with rain. Fine, persistent, almost imperceptible rain, the kind that seems insignificant at first, but then you suddenly realize you're soaked through. That day I stood at the bus stop with 2 suitcases, wet sneakers, and the feeling that for the first time in my life, I was breathing freely. I rented a tiny room in an old house near the campus. The ceilings were low, the windows creaked, the neighbor upstairs constantly listened to jazz. But it was mine. No one was shouting. No one demanded anything. No one explained to me why I should be patient. My studies were difficult, but fair. If I tried, I got results. If not, no one covered for me with excuses. In the evenings, I worked in a small coffee shop. I was so tired my hands trembled, but strangely enough, I was happy. My parents and I talked on the phone every couple of weeks. The conversations were short and awkward. How are your studies?
Fine.
Do you have enough money?
I'm managing.
They had almost nothing to say about me, but about Lauren always. She's in a new mood now, my mother would say. The psychologist says it's a phase, my father would add. She just needs time. I listened and remained silent, because I knew that any word I said would either be ignored or used against me. In my second year, I met Nathan. He sat next to me in economics class, lent me a pen, and smiled as if he was genuinely interested in what I was saying. We didn't fall in love immediately. Everything happened calmly, almost imperceptibly. Nathan was the first person who once said, "You apologize too often, even when you're not at fault." That phrase hit harder than any of Lauren's screams. Gradually, I began to notice how deeply ingrained the habit of being accommodating was in me. I agreed. I gave in. I explained. I apologized. And I learned little by little to do things differently. Meanwhile, life at home was falling apart. One evening, my mother called me. She was on the verge of hysterics. "Emily, could you talk to Lauren?"
She's gone again.
"We don't know where she is." "Did you call the police?" I asked. "No, she'll get angry." I closed my eyes. "Mom, this isn't normal." "That's just how she is," my mother whispered. "You know that." Yes, I knew. But for the first time in my life, I understood this was no longer my responsibility. Upon graduation, I received an offer for an internship at an analytical company. The salary was modest but stable. I stayed in Seattle. I rarely saw my parents. Lauren hardly ever came home. "She has friends," my mother would say. "Some boyfriend," my father would say. Or two. One day I finally asked, "Are you happy?" They didn't answer. A year later, I was informed that Lauren was getting married to a man almost 12 years older than her. Successful, confident, with money. My parents were thrilled. "She's finally settled down," my mother said. See, it wasn't all for nothing. I flew to the wedding with a feeling of anxiety. Lauren looked perfect. Too perfect. Her fiancé, Adam, was polite, attentive, and looked at her with a slight wariness. "Are you Emily's sister?" he asked. "Lauren has talked about you a lot." I smiled, not knowing exactly what she could have said about me. The wedding went without incident. My parents beamed, and I watched it all and thought, if this is her recovery, then it's frighteningly fragile. I flew back with a heavy heart. And I was right, because the real trials were only just beginning. After Lauren's wedding, My parents seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. A lightness finally appeared in their voices that I hadn't heard in many years. They spoke of her with pride, like a project that had finally worked out. Adam has a good influence on her, my mother assured me. He's so calm and sensible. A stable man, my father added. Exactly what she needed. I nodded, but a strange feeling was growing inside me. Not envy, not anger, rather anxiety. Lauren never changed for long. She only adapted when it suited her. Meanwhile, my life was slowly but surely getting back on track. My internship turned into a full-time job. I moved into a small but bright apartment closer to the center of Seattle. Nathan was in the past. We broke up peacefully without drama because we realized we wanted different things. And that's when Julian came into my life. We met by chance at a charity event that a colleague dragged me to. Julian worked in urban planning, spoke calmly, listened attentively, and never interrupted. He didn't try to impress me. And perhaps that's why he succeeded. It was easy to be myself with him. No need to make excuses. No need to prove that I was good enough. When I first told him about Lauren, he was silent for a long time, and then he said, "You know, you don't have to save people just because you're related." That thought bothered me for a long time. A few months after Lauren's wedding, I received the first message from her in a long time. "You're always playing the victim. Do you think it was easy for me?" I didn't answer. Then other signals started coming. My mother called more and more often. She spoke evasively. "Lauren and Adam are having some difficulties. Just getting used to each other's personalities." But one day, late in the evening, my father called me. "Emily," he sounded confused. "She's not staying home again. Adam doesn't know where she is." I closed my eyes. History was repeating itself. 6 months later, Lauren's marriage began to fall apart openly. Arguments, disappearances, scandals. Adam wrote to me, cautiously, almost apologetically. "I don't know how to help her. She doesn't acknowledge the problems. She blames everyone around her." I wanted to tell him the truth, but I remained silent. The divorce was quick and messy. My parents sided with Lauren. Of course. He couldn't handle it, my mother said. He didn't understand her. Adam disappeared from our lives as quietly as he had appeared. A month after the divorce, my mother called me. "Emily, Lauren is doing very badly right now. Maybe she could stay with you for a while. She needs a change of scenery." I remained silent. "You've always been able to get along with her," my mother added. I looked at Julian. He was listening without interfering. "I'll think about it," I finally said. That was my mistake. Lauren arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. I stood by the window and watched as the taxi stopped at the entrance. She got out slowly, looked around as if assessing the scene, and only then pulled out her suitcase. At that moment, a thought struck me. She hadn't come to visit. She had come to occupy territory. She looked different than at the wedding. Thin, with dark circles under her eyes, but meticulously made up. There was something tense about her, as if a string was constantly taut inside her. "Well, hello," she said, entering the apartment and looking around. "You've settled in quite nicely." It wasn't a compliment. Julian came out of the kitchen, smiled politely. "Glad to finally meet you," he said, extending his hand. Lauren held his gaze for a second longer than she should have. "Me too," she replied, softer than she had ever spoken to me. The first 2 days passed peacefully. Lauren slept until noon, hardly left her room, complained about her broken life and the injustice of the world. I cooked. Julian ordered dinner. We tried to be patient. On the third day, the little things started. Lauren took my things without asking. She left dishes in the sink. She listened to music at night. You don't mind, do you? She said with feigned innocence. We're family, after all. I gritted my teeth. Julian was impeccable. He spoke calmly, kept his distance, and tried not to be alone with her. But Lauren seemed to sense it, and that's why she did everything to blur the boundaries. She started coming out of the bathroom in a towel that barely stayed on. She would lean in too close. She would laugh loudly, touching his arm. I told myself it was paranoia, that I was exaggerating.
Until that day.
I came home from work earlier than usual because of a migraine. The apartment was unusually quiet. I heard Lauren's voice from the hallway. You're unhappy with her, aren't you? She said. She's cold. She's always been like that. I walked into the living room. Lauren was standing too close to Julian. Too confidently. Too familiarly. What's going on here? I asked. She turned sharply. God, Emily, she rolled her eyes. You always dramatize everything. Julian stepped back. She went too far, he said. I tried to leave. Something inside me broke. Pack your things, I said to Lauren.
Right now.
She laughed. You've always been jealous of me, she hissed. Even now. I looked at her and suddenly understood clearly. She wouldn't change. Never. 20 minutes later, her suitcase was by the door. You'll regret this, she said finally. Everyone will find out what you're really like. When the door closed, the apartment became quiet. Truly quiet. I sat down on the floor and cried. Not from pain, but from liberation. I didn't yet know the price I would have to pay. The phone rang the next morning, before I'd even finished my coffee. I knew who it was. I didn't even need to look at the screen. How could you? My mother's voice was sharp, strained. You threw your sister out on the street. I slowly exhaled. Mom. She was trying to ruin my marriage. Don't talk nonsense, my father interrupted. Lauren told us everything. You just couldn't stand that she found common ground with Julian. I felt a coldness rising inside me. That's a lie. You've always hated her, my mother continued. Always thought you were better. Years of patience crumbled in an instant. No, I said calmly. I've always been convenient, but not anymore. Silence hung on the other end of the line. Then my father said, if you don't apologize and take Lauren back, we'll have to reconsider our relationship. Reconsider it, I replied. I hung up. A few hours later, relatives started calling. My aunt from Texas. My cousin from Florida. People I hadn't seen in years suddenly decided they knew the truth. Messages poured in one after another. How could you do that? Family is sacred. You've always been selfish. And then I saw Lauren's post on social media. Long, tearful, full of hints and unspoken accusations. When you trust your family, and they throw you away like a useless thing. The comments were full of sympathy. I had already been judged there. I sat on the couch holding my phone, and for the first time in my life, I didn't try to justify myself. I blocked the numbers.
Deleted contact.
Closed the doors. Julian sat down next to me and silently took my hand. You don't have to explain your truth to those who don't want to hear it. A few days later, my grandmother called me. Her voice was calm and confident. I know what happened, she said. And I'm on your side. I burst into tears. Thank you. Family isn't about those who demand the loudest. It's about those who stay when you say no. That evening I slept peacefully. For the first time in many years. Almost a year and a half had passed since the day I closed the door on Lauren. Life didn't become perfect. It simply became quieter. And in that silence, there was room for everything I had been missing for so long. Julian and I moved to a house in the countryside with a small garden and a veranda. In the mornings, I drank coffee, listening to the wind rustling the leaves, and sometimes I caught myself thinking that I no longer expected trouble with every phone call. It was a new feeling, unfamiliar, precious. I knew almost nothing about my family. Sometimes I received snippets of news through my grandmother, cautious, without unnecessary details. Lauren had returned to her parents. She didn't want to work. The house gradually turned into a revolving door. The scandals became louder. The police were called twice. I didn't ask for details. Not because I didn't care, but because I couldn't anymore. One evening the phone finally rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something inside told me it was them again. Emily. My mother's voice was hoarse. We need help. I remained silent. Lauren, she threatened Dad. We left the house. We're in a motel. I closed my eyes. You're the only one she might listen to, my mother continued. Please. I would have gotten up before. I would have gone. I would have tried. Before, yes. No, I said quietly. How can you? She sobbed. She's your sister. And you are my parents, I replied. But when I was going through a hard time, you didn't choose me. A silence hung in the air. We didn't know it would go this far, my father said. You did, I replied. You just found it more convenient not to see. I said goodbye and hung up. Then I blocked the number. Julian came over and hugged me. You did everything you could. I nodded. And for the first time, I felt not guilt, but peace. A month later, my grandmother came to visit. She sat on the veranda, wrapped in a blanket, and smiled. This is a real home, she said. We laughed, cooked dinner, and talked about trivial things. And I understood. Family isn't those who demand sacrifices. It's those with whom you can be yourself. A year later, I found out I was pregnant. I held the test in my hands and cried, from happiness and fear at the same time. We'll be different, Julian said. I promise. I believed him, because now I knew boundaries aren't cruelty. They are self-love. I lost the family I was born into, but I found the one I chose, and that was enough.